Hi, I'm Neil Bergman.
And I'm Hayley Bergman. Over the last 10 years, we've helped thousands of fitness professionals to get qualified, learn with simplicity, and coach clients with confidence.
We're the first to say that learning and being a FITPRO doesn't have to be hard work, and that with the right structure, support and resources, you can become a confident and knowledgeable fitness professional that is dedicated to more.
So how do you learn, qualify and kickstart as a FITPRO? This is the FITPRO Sessions podcast with Parallel Coaching.
Weights versus group classes for stressed and anxious clients.
That is today's inquiry question for FITPRO Sessions Season 9, episode number 4. And what I love about today's session specifically is the question has come in from a learner, and we're going to deep dive into answering that particular question, which is looking at a stressed and anxious client. We know more about that client as well, and we'll give you the context very shortly. And then looking at whether the resistance training or based approach that they have currently been taking is the right course of action versus a group-based training action.
Lovely. So what I like about this is it's a really specific question. So one of you lovely listeners has sent in this question as a request of something they're struggling with. Now it's really, really specific, but the nice thing is that the answer for this is actually so appropriate to so many clients that we come across.
So many learners are going to benefit from this question. So if you are listening and you've got a client or a particular question, or you're hung up or stuck on moving forwards in your progression as a FITPRO, send us your question and we'll tackle it on the podcast, on FITPRO Sessions.
Exactly, and I'll pop the link alongside this video.
So this is almost like our first Q&A question.
It is.
On FITPRO Sessions.
Like our first guest that isn't really here.
Yeah. Completely. It's like a virtual guest.
Yeah, but they didn't want their name mentioned.
No, completely. So let's give some context to the question.
Yeah,
okay, so this learner has got a client who for the last number of weeks has been on a resistance-based training program, mainly sitting at 8 RM and 10 RM. So 8 repetition max all the way through to 10 repetition max.
So
firmly,
hypertrophy.
Firmly in that hypertrophy goal, and has a hypertrophy aesthetic-based performance goal.
Okay, cool. Lovely.
Now, the client has been on this program for a number of weeks and is making good marginal gains every session.
Yeah.
However, the client is experiencing acute bouts of stress and high levels of anxiety.
I get a bit of stress every now and then.
And I think that's the normality of life, right? I think we can all expect some point we're going to feel an element of stress or high anxiety. Now, what this learner is finding with the client is that they are attending more and more group-based classes.
Right.
And as they're going through these group-based classes, the modality is changing, and therefore they are perhaps expending more calories somewhere else that they're not in control of.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a conflict of interest, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because one approach to training is hypertrophy aesthetics and performance-related goals.
Yeah.
Yet the client is leaning more towards or wanting to go towards more group-based training, which doesn't complement the goal.
Yeah, okay, so it's not going to help with, it's not in hypertrophy rep ranges if it's got cardio, endurance.
Completely. So I'm not sure what the group-based training is, but let's say...
Even if you say it's spinning and circuits.
Or spinning, it could be circuits, it could be body attack, body pump, all wicked classes in their own right.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily complement the actual goal of the client.
And even if it's got resistance, it's probably not 8 to 10 rep max.
Yeah, because in the 3 to 4 sessions that the client has been attending, they've been fatiguing at 8 rep max, 9 rep max, 10 rep max.
Yeah,
so
nice.
Getting complete overload of the muscle and bringing about a stimulus, an anatomical and physiological adaptation towards an aesthetic performance-related goal.
Wow.
Now, here's the thing with that type of goal. I think we might go down 2 different approaches, our own knowledge on this one. So my first thought is that if a client has got an aesthetic performance-related goal, they're going to need to turn up to the gym 3, 4, maybe more times per week, which adds to someone's stress and anxiety.
Ooh, yeah.
So they are potentially could be stressing over fitting these sessions in, and anxious about future sessions, of missing sessions, attending sessions, anxious about hitting a particular overload every session and seeing those those marginal gains. And so the question I have here is does the resistance-based approach for a performance-related goal
fit for the stress and anxiety?
Is it fit for purpose for the stress and anxiety of the client? The other side to that goal would be that if somebody does want to see marginal gains every session or every week in a performance related aspect, then they're going to have a good nighttime routine, a good bedtime routine. They're going to have to get a certain amount of sleep. They're going to, in an ideal world, lower their stress levels to see these marginal gains. They're going to have to be quite strict on their calories in, calories out, their protein intake. And so there's lots of micromanaging of someone's day, which doesn't necessarily help somebody that is experiencing acute levels of stress and high bouts of anxiety.
Ah, nice, because there's much more smaller variables to tweak,
Yes.
to track, lots
Completely.
of things to have a look at. And if they're quite anxious about all the numbers that they're seeing every day, if they're hitting targets.
Completely.
Okay,
So
yeah.
what I'm gonna put out there straight away, and it'd be great to hear your thoughts on this inside the inner circle as well. And it's a great discussion, which is what I like about this type of question and answer and discussion. It's very similar to our brain picks we do inside our FITPRO 31 program,
Yeah.
where FITPROs join us for a number of weeks, and we coach you towards better consultations, better planning, understanding nutrition, understanding the macro and micro planning elements of working with clients.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's no necessarily right or wrong. It's actually unpicking this question and seeing what's right for the client. And I like to come back to that individuality, or one of the principles we learn at level 2.
yeah.
Okay, so what is individual about this particular client, and how do we
What
move
I
forward
find
with
really
this client?
interesting about the individual client that they chose to now start going to classes on top of what they said originally was their goal.
Yes.
I find that quite interesting. So like they started off already doing the resistance sessions. They said to the PT, this is what my goal is, help me get there. And then these other classes have started creeping in, which to me means that they're missing something that they weren't getting from somewhere else. So is that helping them with their stress and anxiety differently? And that's maybe why they're choosing the class, because it offers something else
Yeah.
to them.
Perfect.
And for me,
Yes.
I think that's probably going to be along the lines of a social element, or maybe it's that like getting the heart rate up and the enjoyment they get from it. Maybe it's the routine of a set class to go to.
I think what a class offers is the fact that you turn up at a particular time. Okay, it's similar to a PT session, but there's going to be multiple spin sessions per week, or multiple circuit sessions in a gym per week, or multiple body combat per week, which means you've got multiple times to actually have that opportunity to go.
Yeah.
Which means you turn up, and you literally follow along with the instructor. And so it takes away a lot of the stresses of, I've got to be at this point for a particular time. If I miss it, I've still got another opportunity, potentially even the same day.
Yeah. Nice.
Okay.
The other part of this is that so often when people adopt and take on more exercise, and if they're experiencing stress, what I wouldn't be surprised of it is that they're doing it to kind of escape from something that is in
That's
their
a
world.
really good point, actually.
Because
Yeah.
if they're choosing to go into classes, do more, have more hours into it, like I often see this with runners, for example. They'll suddenly start creeping up their running, and actually it's their way of dealing with the stress, their way of dealing with anxiety, but it is an additional stress to the body.
Perfect.
And actually it's almost like a sedation process.
I was going to say the word is sedation.
Yeah.
I
That
think-
sedation process of I'm going to go to more classes, it'll make me feel better. I'm going to go to more classes, get more of a buzz, feel better, switch off. And yet the accumulation of the stress on your body, physiological stress, doesn't help.
I think we've got to remind ourselves as fitness professionals, regardless of what modality you prefer, is all exercise is another stressor on the body. Now, as fitness professionals, we see this stressor as a healthy approach. Does that make sense? It's a healthy
What is the
stressor.
adaptation?
It's the adaptation, because you're going from A to B, and in an ideal world, you're improving or bettering yourself. But at the same point, we could look at, say, alcohol, for example, and say, well, that's a negative stressor on our body.
Yes.
Okay, but they're still both stressors. So one person in a stressed or anxious mind might turn to alcohol. Another person might turn to increase frequency and adherence to training.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
the other
Different
side...
sedations, they both sedate away from
But
something.
the question still remains, Hayley, what one is best? Is a resistance-based approach
Yes.
or a
distraction.
group-based? It's not distraction. It's a great discussion. I hope this brings a value to you as well. But what one is best? Is there a better one for this particular client?
I think it comes down to the goal. What is the client's real goal?
Yeah.
So they've turned around originally and said it's hypertrophy.
An aesthetic
An
performance-related
aesthetic
goal.
performance-related goal. Or is it that they want to combat their stress and anxiety? In which case, which of those is the bigger priority?
Yes.
Because if it's the stress and anxiety, you might pick the class-based
Well, I'm going to go
scenario.
on. I think we need to place for health back into health and fitness. So I'm going to say that in order to move forwards with your aesthetic performance related goal, then the underpinning principle, health, must be the foundation to that. So let's say, for example, we gave the client that dichotomy of like, which goal is important to you? Do you want the performance related aesthetic goal with hypertrophy, or do you want to reduce your stress and anxiety? Now, in terms of readiness, commitment, and importance, the client still might turn around and say, in the stressed world, I still want my aesthetic goal.
Yeah.
However, I want you to consider that in order to get the most out of that aesthetic performance related goal, we first must have a healthy mind.
Nice.
And so it might be that you might take a small hiatus from the specifics of the aesthetic goal and focus on maybe a more group-based approach or a more individualized program that encompasses more group-based training, if that's what the client
and
wants.
what it is they
needs.
wanted from that. So it's that questioning, isn't it? What is it you were looking for from these group-based? Well, okay, let's focus on that thing you're missing.
Because if you've got a healthy mind, I genuinely believe you're going to go on and get a better performance-related goal.
It's that more fulfillment, isn't it? And if you feel fulfilled, then you can put in what you want to be able to give it.
I can somewhat like feel this as well. I've started many programs over the last 20 years of training plus. Do you know what I mean? Where I've gone, I'm going to go on and develop my 10k runs, for example, or I'm going to develop go on a bit of a muscle building campaign. But within just a few short weeks, I found myself a couple of times where my health hasn't been tip top. And so I've had to kind of park my goal, focus on my health to return back to my goal.
Oh, that's nice.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that.
And
It's
in
a really
doing
nice
so,
perspective.
I've actually found the last couple of years where I focused more on health, I actually found more balance and found that I didn't need to return back to that particular specific goal.
So you didn't need that external, challenging, performance-based goal.
No.
You actually needed a health-related goal.
Yes. So I think there's a conflict of goals here. Does that make sense? Because
which interfere with each other.
There is an interference. So you could look up Eric Creasy's interference model and say, well, is the client going to be biased towards resistance strength training, hypertrophy training, in the aesthetic goal, or are they going to be biased towards more of an endurance-based class approach?
Yeah, or maybe their main focus is enjoyment or relaxation, or maybe the classes they're going to, I assumed like a high intensity class, maybe they're going to Pilates and yoga and relaxing.
I have a feeling
I hadn't even imagined that.
Yeah, completely. I have a feeling this question comes about from a lot of FITPROs as well. And having spoken to the learner about this particular goal, there was an element of fear from the trainer, the FITPRO as well, the learner, because they focus heavily on the aesthetic side of training. They focus heavily on the hypertrophy. Their specialism.
Threatened that they're going somewhere else.
I think so. And we've had this discussion with the learner, and we did get into the nuts and bolts of that a little bit more. And I liked that because at the end of the day, this learner has got this signature package that works with ladies around aesthetics and performance-related training. Okay. Now, the client is going more towards the group-based training class where the learner, I know we're getting all mixed up with people here, the learner doesn't specialise or have any qualifications in that realm. And so she found our client was dwindling in sessions, cancelling, postponing sessions, changing sessions in favour of somebody else, another fitness professional leading the way.
Which can feel really threatening,
which
make
can
you
feel quite
really
threatening
horrible.
completely.
Yeah.
Now, I want you to consider as a FITPRO that we want the best for our clients, right? And so that might be that we tag team up with other FITPROs that don't conflict with your signature program. We're all on we're all fighting the same fight, good fight, right?
Yeah.
We're all in the same trenches. So like, you might be a FITPRO with a signature program that works with ladies specifically around aesthetic and performance related goal, but you might also have on your multifaceted team a yoga instructor, a Pilates instructor, somebody that does spinning, and you all kind of refer clients in and about your program, knowing full well that if I send a client to a spinning instructor, then they're going to complement my client's training, not pinch my client.
Yeah.
And I think
that's
that's
really
one of the fears for FITPROs, is that if a client should go to another trainer, then they now have your client and they've pinched that client and potentially pinched some revenue from you.
But the danger with that is that then in order to keep them yourself, like I'm going to keep my client, you almost keep feeding the machine of trying to make them do something that maybe isn't really necessarily their true goal or need right now.
Completely.
And actually it doesn't come down to the mode, which I find really interesting. So it's become a this or that. Should they do weight or should they do classes?
Good. That's a really good point.
And actually,
I like that.
It could be that all you need to do is ask your client again. You just got to do a reconsultation, where you find out more about what they actually really want now, because it might have changed.
Well, that's what I like
and then
about
dial back in to find out what suits for their adaptation, their programming, what needs they have now. Has it changed? And then from there you can support them differently based on where they are now, not based on where they said they were 6 weeks ago.
I talked about that in the PT course 2 weeks ago in our Milton Keynes Academy, and on last week's FITPRO 31 Brain Pick, about checking in with your client on a more frequent basis.
Yeah.
And we've used this analogy, so apologies if you've already heard it, but imagine a triathlete gets into the water, goes off for a swim, and as they start swimming out towards their first buoy, they go off course. And at the side of the the main course that all these triathletes are swimming down, there's kayakers on the water beating their paddles to say, hold on a minute, you're checking in, you are going well off course, you need to go back on course. And so what we are as coaches is we are that kayaker out on the water, beating our paddle, giving regular check-ins. And I think as FITPROs, if we're checking in on a regular basis, that might be another consultation, another sit-down subjective review or objective review, trying to find facts about where we are right now.
That could be as simple as a coffee chat, right?
100% it could be as simple. Yeah. But it's what comes of that is we realise that the client joined up with us, let's just say 6 weeks ago, with an aesthetic performance goal, and now life has changed slightly and mindset and mental state has changed. We now need to check in and just go off course and go in a different direction for a few weeks, which is perfectly fine.
What I like about this is it removes assumptions.
Yes.
So we can make an assumption, the reason why they've gone to the other classes, they don't like me anymore.
Yeah, great point. I like that.
And actually it turns out they go, no, I just want to do everything I can for my goal. And they think that going to every class under the sun will help, but they don't understand that it's actually conflicting.
Yeah.
So actually sometimes it opens up the pathway to be able to have that conversation.
It would be interesting to know more about the client, of why they chose, say, group-based classes. Was it the community feel, the social feel?
Their friends go? Was
it their friends going? Like the driving factors behind that. But in the grand scheme of things, they're choosing potentially a slightly, I'm not going to say easier option, but a slightly lower intensity in an endurance range. So my question would be could I assist with this by getting the client to increase their NEAT and also the number of steps they achieve per day? Okay, so that could reduce, we underestimate the power of walking. And it could just be by going out for more frequent walks or slightly longer walks or hitting a certain step count per day could be enough to reduce the stress and anxiety.
Yeah, it really could. And how that is throughout the day. Like they might turn around and go, well, actually, if I break up my day and have a lunch break where I walk, it allows me to relax, switch off, and I don't feel like I need to do that at the end of the day in a vicious spin. A spin
So
session.
you talked about modality, which would be the type in the FITT principle. And I think, again, a lot of FITPROs, as we develop, we park the FITT principle and go, that's what I learned at level 2. It's not relevant for me anymore, but I want you to consider that it is always, it's the underpinning principle. Frequency, how many times does somebody train per week? The intensity, what repetition, what RPE do they sit at, depending on the modality, heart rate max, reps in reserve or whatever. And then the type of exercise and the time they train for. Like, we're using the FITT principle whether we know about it or like it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you go for a brisk walk once a day. There you go, FITT principle.
So you've talked about the modality in terms of the resistance training versus group class. Yeah. But now let's look at the frequency of training. It could just be by reducing the frequency or tweaking the intensity.
Yeah, definitely.
They could continue what they're doing, get slightly smaller marginal gains, okay, but still take more of a conservative road towards their goal.
And then they get more of what they want.
And they get more of what
But
they want.
all of this only comes from having that conversation and opening it up, which
Completely.
is exactly what you said about having that reconsultation,
Yes.
that chat, that check-in has to happen.
I think there's
in
some
order to
key
know what they
open
really
questions.
need.
So I'd invite you to go back to season 8, which was all about behaviour change, if you haven't done so already. And that's what I like about FITPRO 31 is the 5th module is called The Glue That Sticks It All Together. And it's a mindset behaviour change module. And it's understanding that we can support our client from a resistance perspective, a cardiovascular perspective, a training perspective overall as the global heading, or a nutritional perspective. But what's the glue that sticks it all together? It's the mindset, isn't it? So if someone's mindset or mental health isn't, I'm not going to say we're going to have tip-top mental health all the time, but if it isn't progressing towards being tip-top all the time, then it doesn't matter how much nutritional guidance and coaching and accountability we give them, or how much training, coaching and accountability we give them, it's never going to really take hold unless our mindset is there.
Yeah, best workout plan in the world or best nutrition plan in the world, if they don't do it,
Because if we
they
go
don't get the result.
That's what I wanted to say a minute ago, and I had to go off tangent, I'll be honest. If we go on like the frequency element, we might find that the number of sessions per week fall within the full 168 hours of the week.
Yes, okay, yes. So it's not just that they're doing, say, if they do 2 sessions a week, and they're both an hour, and they've got 168 hours in the entire week.
There's 166 hours of opportunity. That
what else are they doing?
What else are they doing? And so I think it doesn't matter how many times a week you train, you're always going to be in a negative space for the additional hours of that week that negate your goal.
Yeah, you're never going to do more than 80 sessions a week, 80 hours a week to be halfway.
Exactly, completely. So in the grand scheme of things, for 3 to 4 sessions that this client is doing towards strength, yes, they do get an anatomical and physiological adaptation in marginal gains each week towards the aesthetic goal. But in the grand scheme of things, if we were to focus on the other 165 hours of a week to challenge their mental state in terms of their stress and their anxiety, how else can we coach them? And, mental health has got a lot of awareness the last few months and few years, right? But I still think that there lacks the actionable, tangible things that a client or a person can do day to day, something that they can find easy, something that's attractive, something that's straightforward, something that's simple to do. But they say, if I do this, I feel less stressed. If I do this, I feel less anxious.
Yeah, I think
so.
Yeah,
jumping in, like, what is it we do as fitness professionals that actually benefits for clients' stress levels or anxiety levels in an actionable and tangible way? Not by saying like, go and try this or try that. Like, what can they actually do? And only you'll know that from your consultation and your individualized approach.
That's what I like about that. That's awesome. So what I like is that if you imagine, I always imagine a scale when you're saying this, like imagine the whole aim is to tip the scale, which in this case is the mental health, like feeling better or whatever the goal actually is. If they do 3 sessions per week, that's like putting a little 3 unit weights on one side of the scale, and it tips it a tiny bit. But you've still got the potential of 165 other things that you could put to it based on an hour, times the only thing that we all have the same constant, right?
Completely.
So then you go, okay, well, good night's sleep, that's another one. And a little bit of good food, that's another one.
But it's easier said than saying. So this is my point. It's easy to say you've got to up your knee. It's easy to say you've got to clean up your food. It's easy to say go and get a good night's sleep. But this is my question for FITPROs is, what do you do to support the client to actually develop and build a nighttime routine that supports them?
So the actual individual things.
Actual individual actions that you are going to coach and be alongside your client and hold their hand and help them and guide them, that means they can actually do that.
Yeah, and we mentioned
because you can say to me, Neil, you need to have a better nighttime routine. I'm like, that's great. But in my anxious and stressed world right now, that's really hard to pull off. Yeah. Can you help me figure this out? Yeah, and we might take it for granted that these are real simple things from the outset, but they're clearly not simple things.
That's what
otherwise
I
the
liked
client would be doing them.
so much about season 8 is that we went into all the behaviour change. We talked about the yellow brick road and all
Yes.
these little tiny bricks that build up to the entire yellow brick
Completely.
road. They help you decide what advice you're giving them to move forward.
So if you think in the week you could have 168 little yellow bricks, but if we laid all these down in one long line, we'd have the yellow brick road towards the goal and we would see marginal gains. But there's 168 opportunities. Now, training towards this aesthetic goal is just 3 of those bricks, which is 3 sessions per week.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question comes down to, like, it has to come back to the goal is a sit back down with the client and truly figure out, do we need to take a small hiatus from a current training approach? That's not to say we won't return back to it or we can't still complement that, but what else can we do?
Yeah. What's your needs and wants right now in terms of your goals?
Yes.
Bringing it back to the goals, finding out what they want, why did they choose the classes in the first place, and bring it back to now decide what's the next one actual step they can take to help them towards what they genuinely believe is their next goal.
Yes.
And even if you're a specialist in, let's just say, hypertrophy training for women like we had on this one, then you can still be a coach around all these other areas.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that they're off to someone else.
No, completely.
I was going to say off to the wizard.
Off to the wizard.
With
the wonderful wisdom.
Yeah, that's it, with the
completely.
yellow brick road. Doesn't mean they're going off to someone else, because you've actually got each of the yellow bricks that you can help them build towards the path.
Yes. So in the grand scheme of
That
things,
will make sense as an analogy if you've listened to season 8.
yeah. So if we think about this, you know, I get it that we've trained as FITPROs and our love is within training and within challenging someone's nutrition. I get that. However, we've got to recognise that dose of training needs to be pretty potent each week in order to move forwards, in order to outweigh the other 160 plus hours of life.
Yeah,
so
it's got to be
I want you to consider it as a FITPRO, regardless of your modality or your signature program of who you work with. You are coaching, mentoring and guiding your client through the entire week, not just for 3 or 4 sessions, regardless of the mode that they choose to turn up to.
Yeah. Yes, it's the bits in between.
It's the bits in. It's actually, I'm going to have you consider actually the training is the bits in between.
Nice.
It's actually the training. It's the other way around.
Yeah.
It's not the little bits in between. The training is the little bits in between life, right?
Yeah.
Training fits into life. There we go.
There you go.
What a wicked question and topic.
And what I love is that, like we said at the beginning, it was so specific.
Yes.
Yeah, I know that you guys have taken some nuggets from that you can go, oh, I could do that with my client, or oh, that client struggles with this.
So in summary, okay, what I'm going to say is go back and sit down with a client, have another consultation, sit down, find out and check in and be that coach on the water, hit the paddle on the water and check in and find out exactly where they are right now, find out the facts. Understand what life is like for them, regain a different level of empathy and see life through their eyes, and have a discussion with the client of how you're going to move forwards as a coach with the client to whatever the goal is for the client at that moment in time.
Yeah,
so it comes back to a
perfect.
goal, end in mind.
Love it.
Superb. Hope you've enjoyed this one.
I want to know what your big takeaway is. How have you taken this information and what's the one thing you've extracted from it that you're going to use with your clients or for your own knowledge? You can drop a comment in our Inner Circle Facebook group. There'll be a link alongside this video for you to go and do that if you're not already in
But
there.
I'd really like to know what questions you would like us to cover.
That's the main one.
I reckon we're going to get, I'm going to be honest, I reckon we're going to get a barrage of questions and we will do our very best to answer them as we go through season 9. So please, what I will say, please message us or email us and say, could you cover this topic? Give us a nice lot of context and information about why you would like it covered and what you would like covered.
Also, what would be really good is I'm going to include a voice link for you, so you can actually leave us a voice message with your question.
If you wanted to.
And then if you want to, you can do that. If not, you can just text it and write it to us.
That'd be cool. But also, I want to recognise that we will let you know when we're gonna tackle that question. We might tackle 2 or 3 questions in one show. But it's what I want to be really honest and open, say if you email us today, that doesn't necessarily mean it will be on next week's show, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So by all means, send us your questions. What would you like us to cover? What would you like us to deep dive into and give you our 2 pence on, and we'll go from there.
Perfect.
We will see you bright and breezy next week, next Tuesday, for episode number 5.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Neil Bergman.
And I'm Hayley Bergman. Over the last 10 years, we've helped thousands of fitness professionals to get qualified, learn with simplicity, and coach clients with confidence.
We're the first to say that learning and being a FITPRO doesn't have to be hard work, and that with the right structure, support and resources, you can become a confident and knowledgeable fitness professional that is dedicated to more.
So how do you learn, qualify and kickstart as a FITPRO? This is the FITPRO Sessions podcast with Parallel Coaching.